Commander Hayes stood at the observation window of the stellar dawn, watching the Zephyr Nebula spread out before him like a painting of blues and purples and greens. The research vessel hummed beneath his feet, a familiar sound that meant home to him. He had spent 7 years in deep space, studying new worlds and making first contact with unknown species. This was his job, and he was good at it. The call came through his communication device. It was Captain Roberts from the main deck. "Commander, the delegation is ready for the formal meeting. They want you in the conference room in 10 minutes. Nodded to himself, even though Roberts could not see him. He straightened his uniform and made his way through the clean white corridors of the ship. They were an advanced species. That much was clear from their technology and the way they moved through space. Their ships were beautiful and strange, made of something that looked like crystal but was harder than any metal had ever encountered. The first contact had been peaceful. They had responded to the human broadcasts with interest rather than fear or hostility. When entered the conference room, he stopped for a moment to take in the sight before him. The delegation was arranged around the table like living sculptures. Their bodies were made of something between crystal and glass, translucent and gleaming. Inside their forms, lights moved and shifted, creating patterns of blue and white. They looked at with what he assumed was friendliness. He could not read their expressions because they did not have faces in the way humans did. The lead, who called himself Council Leader Vex, gestured to a chair. His voice came through a translator device, smooth and precise. "Commander Hayes, we are honored by this meeting. Your species is remarkable. We have studied the broadcasts you sent into space. We have learned much about humanity." Sat down, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him like a heavy coat. "We are honored as well. Your species is unlike anything we have encountered. We hope to establish peaceful relations and perhaps trade between our peoples." For several hours, they discussed trade possibilities, cultural exchanges, and the establishment of formal diplomatic relations. It seemed to be going well. They asked many questions about human biology, human culture, and human capabilities. Answered honestly, though he noticed that the questions about human genetics and reproduction were more detailed than he might have expected. At one point, Council Leader Vex said, "Your species reproduces through biological means. This is fascinating to us. We have not reproduced successfully in 73 of your years. Our genetic structures have become unstable. Our population grows smaller with each generation." Understood that this was a difficult subject, but he also understood why they might be curious. "That is a serious problem. I am sorry to hear it. Perhaps our scientists could work together to find solutions." Council Leader Vex made a sound that the translator rendered as agreement. "Perhaps, but first, we must return to our ship. We must confer with our leadership. We would like to invite your commander and several of your senior officers to join us for a formal dinner. This would be a great honor." Reported this conversation to Captain Roberts, and it was agreed that they would accept the invitation. That evening, dressed in his formal uniform and took a shuttle to the ship with 3 other senior officers, Dr. Sandra, Chief Engineer, and Science Officer Price. The shuttle docked in a bay that seemed to be made entirely of that same crystalline material. The dinner was unlike anything had experienced. The served food that was beautiful to look at but tasted like nothing recognized. They drank something that was cool and slightly metallic. The conversation was polite and interesting. They were genuinely curious about humanity, and they asked thoughtful questions about human history, human art, and human emotion. As the evening progressed, began to feel something odd, a slight heaviness in his limbs, a strange fogginess in his mind. He looked at the other officers and he could see that they were also affected, was struggling to keep his eyes open, was swaying slightly in her seat. "What is happening?" asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Council Leader Vex stood up. The lights inside his crystalline body pulsed rapidly. "I apologize, Commander Hayes, but your presence here is required for a matter of great importance. Your 3 companions will be returned to your ship unharmed, but you must remain with us." Tried to stand, but his body would not cooperate. His limbs felt like they were made of lead. He wanted to protest, to demand an explanation, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of his vision. He heard shouting something, and then there was nothing but silence and darkness. When woke up, he was in a room made entirely of that crystal material. The walls glowed with a soft blue light. The floor was smooth and warm beneath his bare feet. They had taken his uniform and replaced it with simple gray clothing. When he touched the walls, they felt solid but also seemed to shift slightly under his fingers. In the center of the room was a door. Went to it and tried to open it. The door slid aside, revealing a corridor that stretched out in both directions. Before he could move, barriers of light appeared on both sides of him, blocking his way. The message was clear. He could move within certain boundaries but not beyond them. A voice came through some kind of speaker system. It was Council Leader Vex again. "Commander Hayes, you are now under the authority of the Empire. Your cooperation is required for a matter of biological importance to our species. You will be treated well. You will be given food and shelter and comfort. But you cannot leave this facility. You cannot communicate with your ship. You cannot refuse the duty that has been assigned to you." Pressed his fists against the light barrier, but it held firm. His mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. They had taken him. They had drugged him. They had locked him away. And they were speaking of some kind of biological duty. "What do you want from me?" shouted at the speaker system. There was a pause. Then Council Leader Vex's voice came back, calm and measured. "You will understand soon, Commander. You will meet the princess. Everything will be explained. For now, rest. Tomorrow your new life begins." Moved deeper into the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He did not know what they wanted from him, but he knew one thing for certain: he was no longer free. He was a prisoner in the heart of an alien ship, far from his crew, far from Earth, far from everything he knew. And whatever they wanted from him, they were willing to use force to get it. Did not sleep that night. He sat on the edge of the smooth platform that served as a bed and waited for dawn or something that might count as dawn in this strange place. The walls continued to glow with their soft blue light, and he could not tell if this was the normal lighting or something designed to keep him awake and disoriented. When the door to his chamber finally opened, a figure stood in the doorway that made his breath catch in his throat. She was made of the same crystalline material as the other, but something about her was different. Her structure was more defined, more graceful. The light that moved through her body was not the sharp white of Council Leader Vex, but rather a softer blue and silver that seemed almost gentle. "I am Princess Lyra," she said. Her voice came through a translator, but it sounded different from the other. It had more variation, more emotion in it. "I have come to speak with you." Stood up, his back straight. He would not show this alien that he was afraid, even though fear was flooding through his body. "What do you want from me? Why have you brought me here?" Princess Lyra moved into the room, and the door slid closed behind her. The barriers that had blocked the doorway vanished. She was tall, perhaps a full head taller than, and the way she moved had a kind of elegance to it that reminded him of dancers he had seen on Earth. She gestured to the platform where he had been sitting. "Please sit. I know you must have many questions. I will try to answer them." Remained standing. "I want to know why I have been kidnapped and imprisoned. I want to know what this biological duty is that you mentioned, and I want to know if my crew is safe." Princess Lyra made a sound that the translator rendered as a sigh. Inside her crystal body, the lights shifted to a slightly darker blue. "Your crew is safe. They are on their way back to your ship. Captain Roberts has been informed that you will be remaining with us for a time. As for why you are here, it is a matter of survival for my people." She moved to the opposite side of the chamber and gestured with something that might have been her hand. A screen of light appeared in the air between them. On the screen, saw images and data that the translator converted to words he could understand. My species has a problem, Commander Hayes. Our reproduction has failed. For generations, we have created new, but each generation is weaker than the last. Our genetic code is degrading. Our scientists have calculated that we have perhaps 100 of your years before our species becomes unable to sustain itself. We will become extinct unless we find a solution. Watch the data. The numbers were stark and clear. The population was indeed declining, and the rate of decline was accelerating. It was a tragedy in a way, but it did not explain why he was here. That is terrible, said carefully, but I still do not understand what this has to do with me. Princess Lyra gestured again, and new data appeared on the screen. It showed genetic sequences, human DNA alongside DNA. There were complex charts and calculations. When we studied the transmissions from your species, we analyzed your genetic code. Your DNA is remarkable, Commander. It is adaptive, resilient, and complex in ways that our own genetics have lost over. Our scientists have run thousands of simulations. The combination of human and genetics could create offspring that are stronger, more stable, and capable of saving our species. Understanding crashed down on like a wave. You want to breed with me. You want me to. With you. Not with me personally, Princess Lyra said, though the lights in her body shifted again, turning a deep indigo. At least not only with me. I am to be the first. I am the princess. I have been raised and trained for this duty. But if the first breeding is successful, there will be others. We require multiple successful offspring to ensure the survival of the genetic program. Felt his anger rising. This is insane. You have kidnapped me. You have brought me here against my will, and you expect me to cooperate with this. This is not a choice. This is rape. This is slavery. I know, Princess Lyra said quietly. The lights in her body pulsed slowly, and her voice seemed to carry weight and sadness. I know that your people have words for what this is. I have read your literature. I have studied your philosophy. I understand why you are angry, and I am sorry. Her apology took by surprise. He had expected defiance or coldness or scientific justification. He had not expected genuine remorse. I have spent my entire life, Princess Lyra continued, preparing for this moment. I was born with a unique neural structure. I was given the education and training that would make me capable of bearing the burden of saving my species. I was told this was my purpose, my destiny, and I accepted it because I loved my people. But when I learned that we would be bringing a human here against his will, I began to read your works. I read Shakespeare and Baldwin. I read your poetry. I read your laws about consent and freedom and human rights. She paused and could see the confusion in the way her lights moved, stuttering and irregular. I realized that I have been wrong my entire life. Or perhaps not wrong, but trapped in a way I did not understand until I encountered your culture. I have no choice in this matter either, Commander Hayes. We are both prisoners of our circumstances. Did not know what to say. He wanted to hate her, to blame her for his captivity, but something in her words rang true. She was being honest with him. She was admitting that she too was suffering under the weight of what her society demanded. My name is, he said finally. If we are both going to be trapped together, you should call me by my name. Princess Lyra's entire body brightened with a blue and silver light that seemed almost like happiness. Thank you. You may call me Lyra. I would like that very much. I would like to speak with you if you will permit it. Not tonight. Tonight you should rest. But tomorrow perhaps you would tell me about your world. Tell me about Earth. Tell me about the things you miss. Was exhausted, confused, and still angry, but he found himself nodding. Tomorrow, he said, I will tell you about Earth. Lyra moved toward the door and it slid open before her. She paused in the doorway and looked back at him. I know this is difficult. I know you do not want to be here. But I promise you this, I will not harm you. I will fight for your dignity and your comfort in whatever ways I can. That is all I can offer right now. After she left, lay down on the platform bed. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, But for the first time since he had woken up as a prisoner, he felt something other than pure fear. He felt curiosity, and he felt a strange sense that perhaps this alien princess who had come to speak with him was not his enemy after all. Over the following weeks, and Lyra fell into a pattern. Each day, Lyra would visit him in his chamber. They would speak for hours, told her about Earth, about the forests and oceans, about the cities and the small towns, about his childhood in Montana where he learned to love the stars. Lyra shared with him stories of history, of a golden age when her people were creators of beauty and art, before the genetic degradation began. But everything changed the day the council decided that was not cooperating quickly enough. Council leader Vex arrived at the chamber with several technicians. They brought devices that looked like nothing had ever seen before. Twisted metal and crystal, humming with an energy that made his skin prickle. "We will accelerate the process," Vex said coldly. "You have been speaking with the princess, but your body has not been prepared. We will now implement the biological restraint system." Tried to run, but the door had sealed. The technicians moved quickly. They forced him onto the platform bed and began attaching devices to his wrists and ankles. Fought them, but there were too many. The devices were made of cold metal and they hurt when they closed around his limbs. Then they injected something into his veins. His vision blurred. His body went numb. When the numbness faded, discovered he could move his limbs, but only within a strict range. The restraints were sophisticated. They monitored his heart rate, his breathing, his body temperature. They could administer drugs directly into his bloodstream. They could restrict his movement completely if he resisted. More terrible than the physical restraints were the chemicals. They began administering compounds that affected his mind and his body. They heightened certain biological responses, numbed his will to resist, and made his body betray him. Felt like he was slowly disappearing, being replaced by something that was not entirely him anymore. When Lyra came to visit him the next day, she found him in a state of despair. He lay on the platform, the restraints gleaming in the blue light of the chamber. His eyes were hollow, and there was no recognition in them when she entered. "What have they done?" she whispered, moving to his side. The restraints prevented from turning to look at her fully. "They have finished the job. I am no longer a person. I am a tool, a breeding tool for your people. I have no choice anymore. My body no longer responds to my will." Lyra's entire form flickered with a kind of distressed light. The blue and silver of her crystalline body turned dark and erratic. "This is not what was supposed to happen. The council promised me that you would be treated with dignity. This is barbaric." "It is what it is," said, and his voice was flat and empty. "Your people need my genetics. They will have them, and I cannot stop them." Lyra left the chamber and heard her moving through the corridors outside, her footsteps rapid and urgent. He heard raised voices, including hers, arguing with council leader Vex and other members of the leadership. The argument lasted for hours. Could not hear all the words, but he could hear the intensity of her defense of his treatment. When Lyra returned to his chamber that night, she seemed different. Her light was brighter but also harder, more determined. "I have spoken to the council. I told them that if they continue with these methods, I will refuse to participate in the breeding program. I told them that their harsh tactics will only compromise the genetic outcome. I argued that a willing participant will produce better offspring than a captive will." "Why would they listen to you?" asked, his voice still hollow. "Because I am the princess," Lyra said simply, "and because I am right. The council leader is not a fool. He understands biology. I told them that humans require psychological as well as physical to reproduce successfully. That trauma and despair lead to weak genetic expression. That cooperation produces stronger offspring." She paused and her lights shifted to a softer blue. "I do not know if they believed my reasoning or if they are simply willing to indulge me because I am of royal blood, but they have agreed to modify your conditions. The most invasive procedures will cease. The chemical compounds will be reduced. You will be given time to recover." Wanted to hope, but hope felt dangerous. What is the cost? What do you get in return? I have agreed to cooperate with the breeding program willingly, Lyra said, and could hear the resignation in her voice. I have agreed to do this not because my government forced me, but because I choose to. Because I believe that perhaps something meaningful can come from this. That perhaps we too can create something that will save my people without destroying your dignity in the process. In the days that followed, the restraints became less severe. The chemicals that numbed Will began to be withdrawn, slowly began to feel like himself again. His body was still under the control of the restraints, but his mind was becoming clear. His spirit was beginning to return. Lyra visited him every day, and slowly, something shifted between them. They were still imprisoned together in this arrangement that neither of them had chosen, but they were also becoming partners in it, rather than captor and captive. Lyra would sit beside him and tell him about the modifications she had demanded from the council. She told him about the young who had begun to question the ethics of the breeding program. She told him about how his stories of Earth had begun to spread through the ship, inspiring curiosity and empathy for his species. "You are changing my people," Lyra told him one evening. "Through me, your words and your humanity are reaching them. They are beginning to understand that humans are not simply genetic resources. You are people. You are individuals with dreams and hopes and fears." Looked at her, this alien princess who had become his closest companion. "And you are changing me, Lyra. You are showing me that even in this terrible situation, connection is possible. Friendship is possible. Perhaps even something more." He did not finish that thought, but they both understood what he meant. The restraints on his wrists and ankles remained, constant reminders of his captivity. But within those constraints, something unexpected had begun to grow. A genuine bond between two beings from different worlds, forced together by fate and circumstance, but choosing now to face that fate together rather than in opposition. When it became clear that Lyra was pregnant, the entire atmosphere of the ship changed. Was moved to a new chamber, one that was larger and more comfortable. His restraints were adjusted, and he was given more freedom of movement within his space. The council leader arrived with a team of scientists to examine Lyra, and for the first time was allowed to be present during these examinations. What he saw disturbed him deeply. Lyra's crystalline body was beginning to distort and crack. The beautiful geometric patterns that made up her form were becoming irregular and jagged. She was in obvious pain, though she tried to hide it. Her lights, usually a steady blue and silver, flickered and pulsed erratically. "The pregnancy is progressing," one of the scientists announced, studying readings that appeared on screens of light. 4 viable embryos. They are developing faster than predicted. The genetic integration is more successful than any of our simulations suggested. But could see that the cost was terrible. Each day, Lyra's body seemed to deteriorate further. The crystalline structure was breaking down. Moved to her side, wanting to touch her, to comfort her, but he was afraid that even his touch might cause her more pain. "Do something," he demanded of the scientists. "She is suffering. Do something to help her." Council leader Vex approached him with that same cold precision he had shown before. The princess knew the risks of this pregnancy. Her body was not designed for biological reproduction. This is a sacrifice she has made for our species. "She is not a sacrifice," said fiercely. "She is a person. She is your daughter, and you are killing her with your indifference." Something in his words must have reached them, because the council convened and made the decision to provide Lyra with enhanced medical support. Machines were brought into her chamber, devices that monitored every aspect of her condition and adjusted the environmental conditions to ease her pain. Was allowed to stay with her constantly. As Lyra's condition worsened, became her primary support. He sat beside her for long hours while she lay on her platform, her body racked with pain, her beautiful crystalline form shattering bit by bit. He talked to her about Earth. He told her about the ocean and the rain and the feeling of wind on skin. He held her hand, or what approximated a hand, and squeezed it gently when the pain seemed unbearable. "I am afraid," Lyra whispered to him one night when the pain was particularly severe. "I did not expect to be afraid of becoming a mother, but I am afraid that I will die before I can hold them. I am afraid that my body will fail completely before this is over." Moved closer to her. "You will not die, I will not allow it. Your people need the solution you are carrying, but they need you more. You matter, Lyra, not as a breeding vessel, not as a genetic resource. You matter as yourself. Your life is important." For the first time since they had met, Lyra leaned into him, her crystalline form pressing against him, and held her, careful not to cause her more pain, while she trembled with fear and physical agony. The pregnancy lasted longer than any pregnancy in recorded history. The scientists were baffled by how Lyra's body continued to sustain the hybrids despite the extreme stress, but understood. It was not just biology that was keeping her alive. It was will. It was her desire to bring her children into the world. It was the support that gave her, the reminder that she was more than the duty her society had assigned to her. When the time came for the birth, demanded to be present. Council leader Vex argued against it, but Lyra insisted. "Stays," she said, and there was strength in her voice despite her weakened condition. "He has been here for all of this. He will be here for the beginning as well." The birth was unlike anything had ever witnessed. 4 hybrid infants emerged from Lyra's damaged crystalline form, and they were extraordinary. They were part crystal and part organic, their bodies composed of both the solid geometric structures of physiology and the soft, flexible forms of human biology. They gleamed with a light that was unique to them, neither purely nor human, but something entirely new. The moment the last infant was delivered, Lyra's body gave way. The crystalline form collapsed inward. Her lights went dark. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, thought she was dead. But then the lights returned, dimmer and more fragile than before, but present. Lyra was alive, barely but alive, and despite her terrible pain and her damaged form, she reached out toward the infants with what remained of her strength. The scientists moved quickly to take the infants to the genetic development chambers, where they would be monitored and grown to maturity. Wanted to stop them, to insist that Lyra see her children, hold them, have some connection to them. But he knew it was useless. The infants were resources now. The council would control their development. Instead, he focused his attention on Lyra. She lay broken on the platform, her body damaged in ways that might be permanent, called for medical assistance, and to his surprise, the council provided it. They brought machines and technicians. They worked throughout the night to stabilize her condition and repair what could be repaired. When the sun began to rise on the next day, the scientists announced that Lyra would survive, but she would never be what she was before. Her crystalline structure had been fundamentally altered by the pregnancy. She would always carry the marks of what she had endured. She would always be changed. Sat beside her as she recovered, day after day, watching her body slowly rebuild itself. And he spoke to her quietly about what they would do next, about the choices they still had, about the fact that she had given everything for her species, and now it was time for her to live for herself. "I cannot," Lyra said weakly. "The council will demand more offspring. They will not care what this cost me. As long as I can survive it, they will ask it of me again." "Then we will force them to care," said. "We will show them what this truly means. We will demand that the hybrids are treated not as genetic resources but as individuals. We will demand freedom, Lyra. We will demand it together." Lyra's lights brightened slightly, and for the first time since the birth, she seemed to have hope. The 4 hybrid infants developed with remarkable speed. Within 3 months, they had reached physical maturity comparable to human adolescence. They were brought before the council in the observation chamber, where Lyra could see them through transparent barriers. The hybrids were beautiful in a way that made both Lyra catch their breath. They had inherited the crystalline structure of their mother, but it was different from pure. Their forms were more fluid, less rigidly geometric. They had taken on some characteristics of human appearance as well. They had what looked like eyes and mouths that could shape themselves into expressions. And inside their crystalline bodies, light moved in patterns that seemed almost alive, almost conscious. The scientists began to run tests. They tried to interface with the hybrids using the standard control systems, technology that had been used to manage consciousness since ancient times. But something was wrong. The hybrids could not be fully controlled. They could not be programmed in the way Pure could. Council Leader Vex's voice came through the communication system, confused and troubled. The hybrids have developed individual consciousness patterns. They are not responding to the standard control protocols. Their neural structures are not following the expected patterns. One of the senior scientists approached the council. The human genetic material is too strong, Council Leader. It has created something we did not predict. These beings have individuality. They have emotional complexity. They cannot be managed as resources. They are more like individuals than tools. Listened to this and he understood. The hybrids had inherited something from him, something that the scientists had not anticipated. They had inherited human autonomy, human will, human individuality. They were not programmable. They were not perfectly controllable. And the society, which had been built on the ability to control and manage consciousness, did not know how to handle them. That night spoke to Lyra in her chamber. She was recovering slowly, though the damage from pregnancy had left her weakened. But her mind was sharp. They cannot control them, said. The hybrids are too human. They cannot be managed like regular. This changes everything. Lyra's lights pulsed with what had learned to recognize as determination. Then we use this. We use the fact that they cannot control the hybrids to demand our freedom. We tell the council that the only way to ensure the success of the hybrid offspring is to allow us to raise them, to guide them, to help them understand both their and human heritage. They will not agree, said. Then we tell them the truth, Lyra replied. We tell them that if they continue to try to control these children, the hybrids will rebel. We tell them that their survival depends not on forcing us to produce more offspring, but on understanding that genuine cooperation produces better results than coercion. Stood and looked out at the stars beyond the ship. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was his life, his crew, his people. He had been restrained and forced to serve a purpose he had never chosen. But now, looking at what he and Lyra had created together, he began to understand that perhaps his captivity had not been entirely without meaning. The next day, asked Council Leader Vex for an audience. He was no longer restrained. The council had removed the devices months ago, understanding that a willing participant would yield better results. Vex granted the meeting, curious to hear what the human had to say. Stood before the council in their great chamber. Vex and the other leaders were arranged above him, their crystalline forms casting light that danced across the walls. Around them, younger had gathered, including those who had begun to question the ethics of their genetic program. I want to speak about the future, said, his voice steady. For generations, your species has been dying. You brought me here against my will because you believed my genetics could save you. And you were right, but not in the way you expected. He gestured toward the transparent barrier where the hybrid infants were visible. The hybrids are the key to your survival, but they are not tools or resources. They are individuals, they are people, and if you try to control them, you will lose them. They have inherited human consciousness from their father. They cannot be programmed. They cannot be managed. They will resist you if you treat them as objects. Council Leader Vex leaned forward. What are you suggesting, human? I am suggesting that you recognize that the real breakthrough is not in genetics but in consciousness. Your species has built itself on control and efficiency, but control prevents growth. It prevents adaptation. It prevents evolution. But the hybrids are something new. They are neither purely nor purely human. They are the bridge between your species and mine, and they require a new way of being. They require choice. They require freedom. They require love. He paused and then he continued. And so do we. Lyra and I, if your species is to survive, it will be because you learn to value individuals, to respect consent, to understand that forcing someone to do something always produces worse results than inviting them to choose. Release me. Allow Lyra to make her own decisions. Allow the hybrids to develop naturally with both of us guiding them. This is what will save your species. Not coercion, not control, but genuine partnership. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members were angry at his presumption. Others were curious about his words, and among the younger in the audience could see expressions of agreement, of hope. The debate lasted for 3 days. In the end, a compromise was reached, one that none of them had expected. Was granted permanent residency in the Empire. He was given full rights, recognized not as a prisoner or a breeding tool, but as an individual with value and agency. Lyra was declared free from any further obligation to the breeding program, and together they were given guardianship of the hybrid offspring. More surprising still, the society began to change. Younger members of the population began to question the old systems of control. Some even began to argue for reforms that would give all more individual agency. It was a slow change, but it was real. Months later, stood with Lyra in the observation chamber, watching their 4 children at play. The hybrids had grown to adulthood in their accelerated way, and they were extraordinary beings. They had formed their own understanding of identity, neither fully nor fully human, but something entirely new. They spoke multiple languages, understood both cultures, and had begun to work as diplomats and teachers, helping their people understand human values while helping humans understand science and philosophy. Lyra moved closer to, and he took her hand. Her crystalline form was still marked by the damage of pregnancy, but she had learned to see those marks not as scars but as evidence of strength, of sacrifice, of love. "Thank you," Lyra said quietly. "For what?" asked. "For not hatting me. For not letting our circumstances destroy your capacity to care about others, for helping me see that there is more to existence than duty and control." Squeezed her hand. "And thank you for listening, for changing, for fighting for us when it would have been easier to simply accept what your society demanded." Their children looked up from their games and smiled. They had learned smiling from their father. They had learned determination from their mother. And from both of them, they had learned that love was more powerful than coercion, that choice was more valuable than control, and that the future could be created not through force, but through genuine partnership between beings who chose to build something meaningful together. As looked out at the stars, he thought of Earth, of the home he had lost when he was captured. But he also understood that home was no longer just a place. Home was here, with Lyra and their children, building a new kind of future, one where 2 different species had learned to see each other not as resources or enemies, but as equals worthy of respect and love.